Hello there, Internet. It's Mass Spectrician again here, and today we are going to join this fellow as he attempts to take a shit. So, by all means, let's us go over to Burghogenes of Hillsborough as he actually is trying to take a shit in this video. It's pretty interesting, but bad. So, enjoy. Way to start out with some class, buddy.
So it seems that, atheists' arguments always kind of boil down to one of two things. There's no evidence for it, and so I refuse to believe it argument. They focus on this word belief. And then the other one is, once you get them past, that whole having an inability to interpret the evidence, which is just all fucking around them.
This is only true if you have an extremely low standard of evidence. For those of us who actually have a reasonable standard of evidence, we do not make this assertion. That's all it is. It is unfounded. When you go outside and look at the universe, what it demonstrates is that the things that you're seeing exist, not that a deity exists.
Once you get them past, the inability to interpret that as, possible evidence that there's an intelligent design or an intelligent force, creating all this.
I.e., lowering their standard of evidence.
Once you get them past that, then they throw this moralistic argument at you, which is how can there be a God that creates a universe where terrible things happen to little children? And it's just you know what? Fuck you. Fuck you. Who the hell are you to fucking question how the universe got set up, man?
What you are trying to discuss here is the Epicurean trilemma known as the problem of evil. You have misrepresented it and put forward an extremely stupid "fuck you, man" as a counter to this argument. Allow me to give you the actual problem of evil, as it is often described. Is God willing to prevent evil, but not able? Then he is not omnipotent. Is he able, but not willing? Then he is malevolent. Is he both able and willing? Then whence cometh evil? Is he neither able nor willing? Then why call him God? So, nice try, buddy, but you did not even come close to addressing the problem of evil with your simple-minded quipping.
You arrogant prick.
Well, you hear it from a dude taking a shit. Epicurus is an arrogant prick. Fuck you, man.
And I know I'm putting this down into an ad hominem attack, but that's just kind of the reaction. It's all right, you make a universe, okay? You go build a universe from the ground up and see how it goes. Have to create matter. Find a basis, a way to design matter, a way to design the structure of the universe, a way to design energy. And then, from all that stuff, set up the physical laws that create the parameters in which it all operates. And then, from there, you have to create some life forms, design all that. And everything has to be based on something else. You can't just, draw a picture of something with legs and have it work. You have to actually have every little detail built on every little detail so it all fucking works. Alright? And then have those life forms, have to work and function based on the access to certain resources that you've put into the universe. And And then you've got to like start having questions of like which ones get the resources and which ones get to stick around. So now you're starting to enter into concepts or problems of morality and ethics, and then it's just like, oh well, this bad things happen, so obviously, there can't be a God because bad things happen. What?
So, the root of your argument is that because it was really, really hard for God to make the universe, evil exists. Sounds like you have a fucking pretty weak-ass God. Thought he's supposed to be omnipotent. The fuck?
Huh? What do you mean there can't be a God because bad things happen? God might just, not care.
And in his apathy, he is tacitly endorsing behaviors such as child rape. Your God is a son of a bitch. Fuck him.
Or they may not be bad. I mean, who the hell are you to say that they're bad? How do you know? You don't know. You'd have to see the full extent of the consequences. Maybe what appears to be immediately be bad, this horrible traumatic thing, is like when you weigh it out in the grand scale of everything, which you can't possibly know because your perceptual abilities are have been like granted to you by a force that isn't yourself, and they're limited.
Okay, fuckwit. You have an example where child rape turns out to be a good thing. Yeah, right. Gotcha, buddy.
And atheists fucking willfully limit their perceptual ability. And that's, again, coming back to it, that's what I'm getting at with atheism is retarded. It's retardation is when you have the slowing of development, when you're holding something back from it being able to move forward or progress or grow. And all atheism achieves is the denial of a possible interpretation of the observations of the evidence all around us in their totality. That's all atheism does, is it says, I refuse to accept a certain possible explanation for the totality of reality, of existence.
On the grounds that the evidence that's been presented is insufficient to compel us.
And that comes all the way back around to another problem that I have with atheism and with people who subscribe to this idea in general, which is that they seem to take atheism, or they take atheism and atheists seem to take existence for granted. They just take it for granted that there is going to be existence.
Well, I don't have any reason to think that there isn't going to be existence, and I don't see what I'm taking for granted by having that view. Idiot.
And that it has to be this one. I mean, that's the funny thing, is it's like, I wonder sometimes if atheists have any imagination, Do they have the capacity to think abstractly? They may not. It seems like people who subscribe to atheism have a difficult time thinking on an abstract level, thinking outside of the limits of the basic parameters of.
Okay, dude, why don't you go and fuck yourself? Atheists don't have an imagination. We lack the ability for abstract thought. Go fuck yourself. Really. Fuck you. You are a fucking clown.
This universe. And it's when you get into that realm of creative thinking That's where, God would operate. God would be like this elemental, pure, primal force, just like the number one thing. It's like, okay, I've got nothing. I'm going to start from nothing and build a bunch of stuff. I mean, it's the same operative mechanism that an artist goes through, or even, like, to a degree, an engineer who wants to create something from the ground up.
I kind of doubt that you realize what you've just done. You've just basically admitted that your God exists exclusively in your imagination. Good work.
So, I mean, but at the most basic level, the evidence is all around you. Like, this is not about a belief, okay? It's about a possible interpretation of all of the evidence. Look at my hand. Look at all the structures. Look at how it developed. If you sort of rewind time and fast forward, or fast backward, and then, like, you at the point where there isn't even an Earth, it's just a bunch of fucking dust floating around in a void, and then just fast forward it and, like, watch all of that and fast forward, you start to see, if you have that the capacity to do that in your mind, you see how, these evolutionary processes are actually akin to creative processes. It's a process. So there's, again, it's about a possible interpretation of the totality of the circumstances.
I don't interpret what I see around me in the same fashion that you do. I see what you're doing is extremely speculative, and I do not have any reason to accept any of this rhetoric that you've thrown at me as compelling. It isn't. It is really, really extremely sloppy style of reasoning that you're employing here.
And atheism, it just, it refuses to accept a possible interpretation. That's all it does. Yeah. I mean, seriously though, having to listen to atheists...
Nobody is forcing you to listen to us, you fucking twit. If you don't want to, don't. You should, but don't if you don't want to. It's not a requirement.
Like, prattle on about how there's no God because there's no evidence for it, even though they themselves exist, and they are a complicated, incredible creature in an incredibly complicated and ordered and structured universe that does have some chaos in it, but, there's a purpose for it.
All this is evidence that I exist, and evidence that the universe exists. None of that shit proves your fucking deity exists. None of it. I am still in the want for this evidence you seem to think exists.
Having to listen to all that is like having to listen to some blind guy tell you that there's, like, no moon. Or it'd be like having to listen to people back in the medieval ages tell you that the Earth is fucking flat. They have no fucking idea. They don't... It's like they can't see, and they're sitting there telling you what isn't.
No, it's not like that at all. What it's like listening to you is you telling me that you know that something exists that you possibly cannot know. There's no mechanism by which you could be imbued with this knowledge that you claim to have. And I don't fucking buy it, because you can't demonstrate the veracity of your claims.
What the fuck? It's like a blind guy telling some guy who can see that what he sees, he doesn't actually see.
No, this is not true. What you're doing is, a better analogy would be two people with the exact same powers of observation looking at a tree and having one person say, hey, look, a tree, and the other person saying, hey, look, evidence of God. One person's making a giant assumption, the other person is not. That's what this is like.
What? I mean, it's just like, oh, okay, alright. thing I was going to add is that, you know, it may not be the case that atheists really are, like, blind and just can't see shit. It's just they're not, like, they're so focused on this, like, scientific method that they're not allowing themselves to use other methods of, you know, inferential interpretation of everything around them. They're just so focused on this, like, evidentiary process as outlined by, like, current scientific method that they just can't get past it.
The reason why we use the scientific method is because it has been tried, and we know that it is a good way to identify truthful things. Your method, on the other hand, has no reliability. It is just you imagining and asserting things over and over again. This is not a way to come to truth.
What I'm getting at is that a lot of atheists that I talk to, they all seem to have like a really strong moral compass, you know? They have this like really strong sense of right and wrong, and they're upset about things that are bad happening to people that are good. And that's a good thing, you know? And actually, to me, that's evidence that these are people who actually have the potentiality to get like, to really understand God. And here's the thinking. Like, you have to wonder about why there would be feelings of right and wrong, you know? Like, why you would feel sad if you saw a child get run over by a car or something, or why you'd be upset if, like, an investment banker is really good at taking a bunch of money, and even if he's doing it legally, it's like siphoning off money from groups of people who don't know how to figure all that out. You have to wonder, like, why it is that a sense of like this is wrong and this is right would come up in a person, because if the universe is just like a godless place that has no intelligence to it and has like there's no intelligent basis, and all it is just like the most efficient organization of this thing or that thing, then like an atheist, especially as a person who would have like no foundational basis in like intelligence, you know.
No foundational basis in intelligence? What the fuck are you talking about?
Or would view the universe as having no foundational basis in intelligence, would be focused on like efficiency, and would think, oh, well, the investment banker that is capable of like using the system, the extant financial systems to his benefit, is a better suited organism than all of the people down there in the ghetto who just can't figure shit out. And yeah, okay, so they starve to death, too bad. Similarly, the little kid who gets run over by a car, he was too stupid, you know, he was an organism that hadn't evolved enough to like survive within the parameters of this universe, and too fucking bad. Like, they wouldn't have that fucking gut feeling of, like, right and wrong. You have to ask, where does that sense of morality come from? I mean, if it really is all just, you know, dominoes stacked against each other, falling in the most efficient way possible, why would morality come up? Like, why would love exist?
This is an example of an argument from personal incredulity. You do not seem to have the imagination to see how naturalistic processes could evolve the morality thing that we see in nature. But really, this has been detailed. People have written books on the evolution of morality, and they do not assert that it comes from a fucking divine, like, supernatural interloper who says, fucking boom, morals. That's not how it fucking works, dude.
For instance, like, those two things actually fly in the face very often of, like, the efficiency that's necessary for a society or for a group of organisms to really, really thrive. Like,
what you've just said is patently false. This is what happens when you get on the internet and start parading your ignorance around as if you're right and everybody else is wrong without actually doing even some fucking cursory research into the matter that you're trying to describe. If you would have looked up the evolution of morality in humans and done some research, you would understand that in social organisms, it is beneficial to be empathetic to the other organisms in that population. This is a good thing, and it helps the population as a total survive. It increases the survivability of the population.
On the basic level, the basic parameters and dominoes, you know, and bits and pieces of this universe. I mean, the other thing I've noticed that's sort of odd about atheists is that they, like people who subscribe to atheism, very often also subscribe to like current left-wing politics, which is predicated on like all of this compassion for the underserved people in our society. And like, where would compassion come from in an evolutionary model?
2 words. Naturalistic processes.
You know? I mean, like, as an organism, why would you have compassion? Why would you fucking care? You know? It'd be about what resources you can get for you and yours, opposed to, like, some other group of assholes who are too stupid to do it.
So you're talking about competition for resources, and the behaviors that you describe here are exactly what we see on Earth. So I do not see how this in any way can support your argument.
I mean, and yet there's this like interesting commingling of like the atheist mindset and like left-wing, like compassion-based governmental policy, and it's just like there's kind of a very deep inherent contradiction there, you know, that there's this godless universe that's just all it is cruel and, you know, all these like horrible things stacked against each other, and the most efficient one wins.
What a simplistic and incredibly myopic summary of the human condition.
Versus, we need to have compassion for like a group of people who can't get their shit together. You know, there's a contradiction there. Unless you go down the road of saying that like they have some sort of higher intellectual process that permits them, you know, the capacity for compassion. But then again, there's a presupposition that this higher morality that they've got is something that they gave unto themselves, that they made it themselves.
Nobody fucking says that. Period. That's fucking stupid.
That like the source of their sense of morality is them. You know, they're not taking the analysis of where their sense of right and wrong, their feelings come from and how it all operates. They're just stopping at themselves. So there's kind of there's a degree of like serious narcissism at work in like atheist mindset as well. This refusal to like it's almost like solipsism.
Is that your $2 word, solipsism? Do you even know what that fucking word means? In no way does what you just said point to solipsism. Solipsism is like the theory that the only thing that exists is yourself. This in no way is solipsism. You're a moron.
In a way, you know, like, oh, I am the intelligence and I'm the only one. Yeah.
Again, nobody fucking says that. Stupid.
So, what was the bottom line here? I forgot. It's just that atheists don't really seem to make a lot of sense. You know, they're not carrying their analysis of things far enough. They're just sort of stopping somewhere. And I'm sure somebody's gonna be like, "Oh, we're stopping where the evidence ends," and that's just not true. You're stopping in your interpretation of the evidence. It's kind of like the difference between reading the lines and reading between the lines. Sometimes what's written is not like all that's there. There's something contained within, and you have to be able to look past just the ink on the page because there's more there.
So let me get this straight. What you're encouraging people to do is to believe things outside of evidence. If the evidence isn't there, then there is no evidence. So you're just going to imagine whatever you want to fill in these gaps. That doesn't work for me, dude. That's not compelling.
The idea. So anyways, it's morning. The other thing is, like, with regards to the evidence, aspect to this, I don't even know why this is a debate. It shouldn't even be a debate. But with regards to the evidence aspect to this debate, about whether or not there's an intelligent force behind the, like, totality of creation of the universe, if there's an intelligent purpose and design in all of this. The other element is, like, what evidence would, like, satisfy, an atheist that God exists?
Well, I'd like some compelling evidence, something physical that I can examine and test and say, oh, this thing exists. All this rhetorical evidence from, like, scripture and shit is not fucking convincing me of anything. To me, these really, really sloppy, weak fucking claims, like all of the ones that you've brought up, have been soundly refuted as and we know that the teleological argument is not sound reasoning. We know that the argument from design is crap. This has been demonstrated over and over and over again, but people still use it. That shit isn't working. What we would like is some actual evidence, not just rhetoric.
I mean, what would it be? Like, let's play a little imaginative, hypothetical game. I mean, are they going to have to get, like, a card from God? Or perhaps God can create a YouTube message for them? Or, like, I mean, maybe God could, like, show up at their house. But again, all of this presupposes that God is going to, like, exist in some kind of corporeal form that, like, they would recognize.
Any of those things would be better than what I have, which is zero physical evidence. Revelation obviously would be the best way. Go ahead, if you want me to believe you exist, reveal yourself to me and show me that you exist. This doesn't happen. None of the things that, like, are supposed to compel me to believe in God have ever done so, because they are incredibly weak in a sense of I can look at them and say, this is a really stupid argument. That's all I've ever been given my whole life whenever anybody's ever tried to compel me to believe in a deity. I've only seen shitty arguments. Some frickin' evidence that said, oh, this is an undeniable thing that I can look at and say, oh, this is definitely the work of the divine. I have nothing even close to that in my experience. Nothing. So anything is better than nothing.
So, again, which just is indicative of like a lack of imaginative ability. You can't go any further than what you already know. It's like what Einstein said: imagination is more important than knowledge, because knowledge is just what you know. Imagination encompasses the entirety of what can be known, and that's not an exact quote.
I do hope you realize that just because you can imagine something does not make it real. You seem to kind of be hinting at that's what happens, but it's not. That's not how it works, buddy.
But anyways, and I know I can almost hear the chorus of response from the atheist, like, camp to this assertion of mine here, which is, well, like, how would you know if there's a flying spaghetti monster or not? Like, how do you know that there's not a flying spaghetti monster, you know? There's no, like, direct evidence for it. There's spaghetti. There is spaghetti. So maybe there's a flying spaghetti monster. Where do you draw the line? You can just keep inferring one thing after another. And it's like, holy Jesus, man. We're talking about a fucking reasonable goddamned interpretation.
No, the flying spaghetti monster identifies that your reasoning is shit. Your interpretation is not a reasonable one, and the flying spaghetti monster perfectly illustrates your jumping to conclusions here.
You can't just go off half-cocked and just think whatever the hell you want, okay? I'm not going to sit here and try to argue that God is like a corpulent reincarnation of a cross between Don Knotts, an octopus, and a 1956 Chevy Bel Air. I mean, that's just fucking crazy.
But your 3-in-1 deity who needs to sacrifice himself to himself and then becomes a zombie Jew and jumps into the sky, that is completely reasonable. Yeah,
I mean, it doesn't make sense. And a flying spaghetti monster, like, just because there's spaghetti doesn't mean that there's a flying spaghetti monster, obviously. But the rebuttal is, if you saw a trail of spaghetti that, like, just extended for miles and miles and miles, like hundreds of miles, thousands of miles, just this trail of spaghetti strewn all over the ground, then it might not be unreasonable to infer from that evidence that there might be some kind of thing flying around dropping spaghetti.
And when I start ascribing all sorts of other characteristics to this entity that's supposedly dropping the spaghetti, the less likely I am to have it perfectly right. So, when you start telling me that you see design in the universe, and this means that a god exists, I don't really see design as evidence of a deity, because there are naturalistic explanations for why things appear the way they do. You're just ignoring them. But you continue to ascribe things like omnipotence and omnibenevolence and omniscience and these things, and every time you make that, you're making an assumption about this entity, and you have no way to know these things for sure, so the likelihood of you being correct about your speculations goes down with each characteristic. So, good job. You aren't proving anything.
Who knows what that could be? I mean, is it an airplane full of spaghetti? Or is it a bird that's got itself a bowl of spaghetti? Or is it some kind of, like, monster that's made of spaghetti? I don't know. I mean, but again, it's a really odd debate, like, or a really odd argument, because it couches the idea of abstract thinking as being only a product of the constructs of the universe. It's really strange, and really all this is coming down to is people who have an imaginative ability and are able to infer or make inferential conclusions about evidence, and then people who just either refuse to or can't. So, yeah, I don't know. Sorry, guys. I mean, it's not delusional to look at everything around us. I mean, I'm in a room now, so I'm sure that, you know, a person, a God detractor, will say, well, that was all created by a person, so you can't say that that's blah, 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 blah. But again, they're not taking their analysis far enough.
That's incredibly stupid. I'm not going to say that, and I don't know anybody who is going to. Atheist or not. That was just retarded.
Concluding or drawing the inference that, like, everything around us, the entirety of the universe, was created by an intelligent force is not delusional. It's not even unreasonable. It is, however, unreasonable to expect people to refrain from drawing inferential conclusions or making inferences about evidence. And it is delusional to think that you, with limited perceptual abilities, can possibly know the full extent of everything going on around you.
Okay, so you recognize that you don't know the shit that you're saying that you do know. What you're engaged in here is nothing more than projection. Tu quo, buddy.
You just don't. Any more than the blind guy, who can't really tell what the hell the elephant is, or is telling the guy with sight that there is no moon, or, the people back in fucking 15th and 16th century that thought the earth was flat, we're absolutely certain. There's no possible way the earth is round. Or there's no possible way that the earth goes around the sun. There's no way. It's just not possible. There's no way that there are germs. You can't see them.
I find it incredibly amusing that you've used those examples. Those are examples of positions that the Roman Catholic Church held. The Roman Catholic Church was the one saying, this shit's impossible. Not scientists. Not scientists. Scientists do not do that. That is a religious position. And sorry, that's just the truth of it. And I don't know about your other example here. I've never heard anybody say anything that germs don't exist and that they are 100% impossible. Nobody said that, and nobody has said it before or after Pasteur's work. I'm sorry, that's absurd.
There's evidence of the thing by its effect on other things. You just have to have that ability to analyze deeper, go further in your thinking.
What you are doing is not some complex analytical technique. What you are doing is throwing out some shit rhetoric and using your imagination to conclude all sorts of ridiculous things. This is not compelling, my friend.
I'm gonna have a coffee and a cinnamon roll now.
Well, there you have it. That was both part 1 and part 2 of Taking a Dump on Atheism. And my conclusion is that this gentleman is constipated. Thanks for watching. This has been Mass Spectrician, hoping your isotopes remain stable. Now don't forget to like this shit, subscribe to my channel, and share this shit all over the interwebs. Cheers!